Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere slightly less relaxing than a delayed colonoscopy appointment. A crowded medieval city during the Black Death. Not the theatrical version with a mysterious man in a stylish beaked mask wandering through blue fog. That outfit belongs mostly to later plague outbreaks. In 1348, your medical professional is far more likely to arrive wearing an ordinary robe, carrying a jar of herbs, and displaying the calm confidence of a man who has absolutely no idea what is happening. So before we begin, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. There is already enough blind obedience in tonight's story. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Perhaps you're lying comfortably in bed. Perhaps you're commuting home. Perhaps you're hiding in the bathroom because it is the only room where your family has agreed to leave you alone for 7 consecutive minutes. Now dim the lights, switch on a fan for that soft white noise, and get comfortable. Pull up the blankets. Adjust your pillow. Find the precise position where your lower back stops sending strongly worded complaints to management. And perhaps tuck your feet underneath the covers, because tonight's city contains rats, fleas, and several animals whose legal status as livestock is being interpreted very generously. For the next little while, you are going to discover what it was really like to be trapped inside a city as plague spread from street to street. How would you know the sickness had arrived when nobody understood bacteria? Would the city gates close? Or would everyone simply begin lying about where they had recently traveled? What would you eat after the markets emptied? Would you trust a physician whose treatment plan involved draining some of your blood because apparently you had too much of it? How many herbs would you need to carry before you stopped smelling the city and started smelling like an expensive roast chicken? Would your neighbors help you if you became sick? Or would they suddenly remember an urgent appointment in another province? Could you escape to the countryside? Or would the villagers see you approaching and introduce you to the medieval concept of social distancing, which mainly involved a locked gate and several farming tools? And most importantly, how long could you survive without antibiotics, clean bedding, reliable information, or the ability to complain about any of this online? Well, congratulations. You have just woken up in the year 1348. You live in a busy European city surrounded by stone walls. Somewhere beyond those walls, merchants, pilgrims, soldiers, sailors, rodents, fleas, and one deeply unfortunate chain of biological events have been moving steadily in your direction. You own 1 pair of shoes, 2 shirts, and a wooden spoon that everyone in your household considers communal property. The church bells have started ringing before sunrise. Nobody will tell you why. And the rat beneath your bed has stopped paying rent. Welcome to the plague city. 1. The bells begin before breakfast. You wake to bells. Not the cheerful kind that announce a wedding, a festival, or the arrival of some important nobleman who has come to inspect the city and eat a banquet large enough to destabilize the local chicken population. These bells are slower, heavier. They roll across the rooftops before sunrise, one deep note after another, drifting through the shutters and settling into the room like cold smoke. For a moment, you remain still beneath your wool blanket. The room is dark. Someone beside you is breathing through a blocked nose with the steady determination of a damaged bellows. A child has kicked off half the bedding during the night. Somewhere near the wall, something small scratches inside the straw. You decide it is probably a mouse. This is optimistic. Another bell begins farther away. Then another. The city has always been noisy. Bells mark the hours, call people to prayer, warn of fire, celebrate holy days, and occasionally remind everyone that a wealthy person has achieved something spiritually significant by dying with property. But lately, the bells have changed. They ring too often. Yesterday, you heard them during breakfast. then at midday, then again before supper. Now they have started before dawn, apparently determined to become the medieval version of an alarm clock you cannot switch off. You sit up slowly. The cold air reaches under your shirt at once, because medieval clothing has many qualities, but thermal engineering is not one of them. Across the room, your aunt is already awake. She sits near the hearth, arranging kindling beneath yesterday's ash. She does not look toward the window when the bell sounds again. "Another burial," she says. She says it casually, as if commenting on rain. Nobody answers. You have heard that people are dying in the Eastern Quarter. A baker first, then his wife, then 2 apprentices. Someone said their bodies became covered in dark marks. Someone else said they developed great swellings beneath the arms. Another person insisted they had been poisoned by bad wine, which is the explanation people generally prefer when they have recently purchased several barrels of wine from a rival merchant. The truth is less comfortable. Nobody knows what is happening. There are stories of sickness in distant ports, stories of ships arriving with dead sailors, stories of villages where fields stand untended because there is nobody left to harvest them. But those places are always somewhere else. Beyond the hills, across the sea, far enough away to be discussed over supper without affecting the appetite. Now the bells are ringing inside your own walls. You pull on your trousers and search for your shoes. One is beside the bed. The other has migrated beneath a stool, presumably during the night, because your possessions enjoy creating small administrative problems before breakfast. The church bell continues. Each note passes through the timber walls and vibrates faintly in your chest. In the street below, doors open, voices murmur, a cart rattles over the stones. Nobody speaks loudly. Even the usual morning arguments sound restrained. Normally, the woman across the lane begins the day by shouting at her husband, her children, the weather, and occasionally God. This morning, she is silent. That worries you more than the bells. You open the shutter a little. Dawn has barely touched the rooftops. Smoke rises from chimneys. The narrow street is damp, and the upper floors lean toward one another as if sharing gossip. 2 men carry a covered body on a wooden board. They move quickly. A priest follows behind them, holding his robe above the mud. He looks exhausted. His lips move in prayer, though he seems to be reciting the words from habit now, like someone who has repeated the same task too many times and misplaced the feeling somewhere around the 7th funeral. You watch until they disappear around the corner. Then another bell begins. Farther west this time. Your aunt places a pot near the fire. "Come eat," she says. And so you do. Because the city may be filling with death, the bells may be ringing without pause, and something terrible may be moving street by street toward your home. But breakfast is still breakfast. And panic, as every sensible medieval person knows, is much easier to manage with bread. 2. A rumor arrives at the gate. After breakfast, you step into the street and discover that the city has already produced 17 explanations for the bells. This is impressive, considering the sun is barely above the rooftops. According to the cooper next door, the sickness came from a merchant ship whose crew died before reaching port. According to the cooper's wife, it began when a comet appeared in the sky. According to the cooper's mother, who has survived 3 husbands and therefore considers herself an authority on all forms of disaster, the problem is young people wearing clothing that is too tight. Nobody asks how tight sleeves might kill an entire neighborhood. It simply feels correct to her. You follow the morning crowd toward the eastern gate, where rumors gather faster than carts. The gate itself is a thick stone opening in the city wall, guarded by 2 men carrying spears, and the expression of people who were not paid enough even before civilization began collapsing. Outside, the road stretches toward farms, villages, and distant towns. Usually, travelers enter in a steady flow. Farmers bringing vegetables, merchants carrying cloth, pilgrims carrying religious badges, and professional liars carrying exciting news from places they have never visited. Today, the line has slowed. A cart stands beneath the arch while guards question its driver. Where have you come from? Saint Remy. Is there sickness there? No. A woman behind him immediately shouts that half of Saint Remy is dead. The driver turns around and calls her a goat thief. She responds with a detailed opinion about his ancestry. For a brief moment, the plague is forgotten because everyone enjoys a public argument. Then one of the horses coughs, and the crowd takes a collective step backward. The guards inspect sacks of grain, bundles of wool, and baskets of eggs as if the disease might be hiding beneath a cabbage. They have received instructions from city officials, though nobody agrees on what those instructions actually are. Some say travelers from infected places must be refused entry. Others say merchants may enter if they swear they are healthy. This is not a flawless system, since people have been known to lie when honesty would prevent them from making money. A clerk sits beside the gate with a tablet, attempting to record names and places of origin. His handwriting grows less careful with every new arrival. By midday, half the city will probably be listed as man in brown hat. You stand among apprentices, servants, shopkeepers, and curious children, all pretending they have important business at the gate. In truth, everyone has come to hear something definite. They want one clear statement. The sickness is far away. The city is safe. The authorities understand the problem. Instead, they receive a traveling friar who says whole families have vanished along the southern road. A wool merchant insists this is nonsense designed to damage trade. A soldier says 3 carts filled with bodies were seen outside another town. Someone claims the dead are rising after sunset. This final rumor attracts the most attention because facts are useful, but walking corpses have excellent entertainment value. You notice a small group of wealthy merchants speaking quietly near the wall. They are discussing whether to send their families away. This is how you know the situation may be serious. Rich men rarely abandon a city unless there is danger, taxation, or an invitation to stay somewhere with better wine. A rider approaches from the road. His horse is sweating heavily, and mud covers both animal and man. The guards lower their spears. The rider calls for the gate captain and hands him a folded message sealed with wax. Everyone leans closer. The captain reads it once, then again. His face changes. He whispers to the clerk. The clerk stops writing. The gate remains open, but only just. A cart is ordered to turn around. Another is allowed through. No explanation is given. This, naturally, creates immediate confidence. By the time you walk home, the official message has transformed into several unofficial versions. The gates will close tonight. The gates will never close. Food will be rationed. Food is already gone. Soldiers are coming. Soldiers have fled. The sickness is carried by foreigner, fog, cats, coins, wells, spices, wool, wind, and possibly disappointing moral standards. You know only one thing for certain. Yesterday, the plague was a story from somewhere beyond the horizon. Today, it has reached the gate. And the gatekeeper looks frightened. 3. Your luxury apartment, featuring 6 people and a flea. Now that the plague has reached the gate, it is probably time to inspect your defenses. Unfortunately, your defenses consist of a wooden door, a loose shutter, and an ant who believes every illness can be cured by adding more onions. You return home through the narrow street, and push past the hanging cloth that separates your family's living space from the workshop below. Calling it an apartment would be generous. Calling it spacious would be a criminal offense. The building is narrow, tall, timber-framed, and slightly tilted, as though it has spent several decades listening to bad news and is now leaning toward the street for support. Your household occupies 2 rooms. Not 2 bedrooms. 2 rooms in total. One is used for cooking, eating, working, storing tools, repairing clothing, drying herbs, arguing about money, and keeping a chicken during weather your cousin describes as unfavorable. The other room is where everyone sleeps. You share it with your aunt, uncle, younger cousin, older cousin, an apprentice, and a baby whose main contribution to household life is producing noise at moments of maximum inconvenience. At night, bodies fit together beneath blankets like spoons in a drawer. Privacy is achieved by closing your eyes. The bed is a wooden frame filled with straw and covered with wool blankets. The straw is changed when it becomes damp, rotten, infested, or capable of moving independently. Today, it merely smells old. This counts as good news. You sit on the edge and remove your shoes. One sole is beginning to split, allowing cold mud to enter from below with the persistence of a landlord requesting rent. Beside the bed stands a chest containing nearly everything you own. 2 shirts, a spare pair of hose, a belt, a wooden cup, a small religious medal, and a cloth bag containing coins you count often, because counting money is soothing when you have very little of it. Your cousin is already indoors, shaking out a blanket. A cloud of dust rises. You cough. She freezes. You freeze. The apprentice freezes while holding a spoon halfway to his mouth. For several seconds, everyone studies you with the quiet suspicion normally reserved for tax collectors. It was the dust, you say. Nobody replies. Your aunt opens the shutter. Cold air enters, followed by street noise, smoke, and the smell of something being boiled nearby that should have been given a respectful burial instead. The room needs air, she says. Your uncle says open windows, allow corrupted winds inside. Your aunt says closed windows trap sickness. Neither has evidence, but both possess volume. The discussion continues while your cousin returns to shaking the blanket, releasing enough dust to create its own weather system. Beneath the straw mattress, something jumps. You slap your wrist. A flea vanishes into your sleeve. This is not unusual. Fleas are everywhere, in bedding, clothing, animal fur, floor coverings, and the cracks between wooden boards. You scratch without thinking. Everyone scratches without thinking. An itch is simply part of being alive. You do not know that fleas can carry plague from infected rodents to human beings. You do not know that the tiny brown insect disappearing beneath your cuff may have fed on a rat only hours earlier. You know only that it is irritating, like damp socks, or your uncle's opinions about windows. Downstairs, the household chicken begins clucking. It was brought indoors because foxes have been seen near the yard. The chicken now lives beside a sack of grain and has developed the confidence of a creature that believes the entire building exists for its comfort. Your cousin tosses crumbs onto the floor. The baby crawls toward them. The chicken arrives first. The baby begins screaming. Your aunt lifts the baby. Your uncle chases the chicken. The apprentice knocks over a cup, and you look around your crowded home. 6 people, 1 chicken, at least 1 mouse, possibly several rats, and a population of fleas too large to conduct an accurate census. If isolation is the answer, you are in trouble. There is nowhere to isolate. No private room. No clean spare bed. No separate bathroom. There is barely enough space to stand without becoming involved in someone else's conversation. Outside, another funeral bell begins ringing. Your aunt closes the shutter. Your uncle immediately complains that the room needs air. And somewhere beneath the bed, the flea continues its workday. For breakfast during the end of the world. With the shutter closed, the flea employed, and your entire household arguing about air, it is time to deal with the next crisis. Breakfast. Your aunt places a pot over the fire and stirs yesterday's porridge back into something resembling food. The mixture has thickened overnight into a gray substance with the structural integrity of wet plaster. She adds water, a pinch of salt, and an onion, because the onion is apparently the senior medical authority in this house. You tear a piece from a round loaf resting on the table. The bread is dark, dense, and old enough to remember yesterday's problems. You tap it against the table. The table loses. This is why you dip it into the porridge. Medieval bread comes in many qualities. Wealthier people may eat lighter wheat loaves. Poorer households rely more heavily on rye, barley, oats, or mixtures of whatever grain was available, affordable, and not visibly moving. Your loaf contains several mysteries. You choose not to investigate. Beside you, your uncle pours weak ale into a wooden cup. Water is used for drinking too, especially when it comes from a trusted well or spring, but small beer and ale are ordinary parts of the diet. They provide calories, taste, and the comforting illusion that breakfast is a social event, rather than preparation for another day of manual labor. The baby receives a spoonful of porridge. Most of it lands on the baby. The chicken watches from beneath the table with professional interest. Nobody speaks at first. The bells continue in the distance. Then your older cousin says the butcher's family has fallen ill. Your aunt stops stirring. Which butcher? The red-haired one. There are 3 red-haired butchers. The angry one. This does not narrow it down. Apparently, the man began shivering yesterday afternoon. By nightfall, he could barely stand. His wife sent for a physician, but the physician was already visiting another household. The apprentice looks down at his bowl. We bought meat from him 2 days ago. Everyone looks at the pot. There is no meat in the porridge. This is reassuring, although only slightly. Your uncle insists the sickness cannot travel through food, because he ate spoiled pork as a child and survived. This is not the scientific triumph he believes it to be. Your aunt says nobody should visit the market today. Your uncle says somebody must go, because the flour jar is nearly empty. Your cousin suggests buying extra grain before prices rise. The apprentice points out that everyone else will have the same idea. There is a pause. Even in 1348, panic buying requires no formal training. You begin to calculate what remains in the house. A little flour, several onions, a crock of beans, some cheese with a surface that could perhaps be scraped into cooperation, a strip of salted pork, 2 dried fish, and enough ale to keep your uncle confident until noon. Under ordinary circumstances, this might last several days. But these are no longer ordinary circumstances. If carts stop arriving, the market will empty quickly. A city does not feed itself merely because it has walls. Grain, livestock, vegetables, firewood, and wine must come from outside. Every loaf depends on farmers, millers, carters, bakers, laborers, animals, roads, and whether all agreeing to participate. The plague is not known for respecting supply chains. Your aunt hands you another piece of bread. Eat, she says. You dip it into the porridge. It absorbs the liquid slowly, like a roofing tile reconsidering its career. Outside, a man shouts that the eastern gate has been closed. Another voice shouts that it remains open. A third voice begins selling onions at twice yesterday's price. This is the most believable report. Your uncle stands. He announces that he will go to the market immediately, before merchants begin exploiting people's fear. Your aunt points out that merchants have been exploiting people's fear since before either of them was born. He ignores this and reaches for his cloak. You volunteer to go instead. You are younger, faster, and marginally less likely to stop at the tavern to gather important information. Your aunt wraps 3 coins in cloth and places them in your hand. Flour, she says, beans if they are cheap, salt if there is any, and do not touch anyone. You glance around the room. You are already touching 2 people. The apprentice is pressed against your shoulder. Your cousin is sitting on your foot. The baby has grabbed your sleeve with hands covered in porridge. You gently free yourself and stand. The chicken steals your bread. Nobody reacts. The city may be approaching catastrophe, but there are limits to what one household can manage before sunrise. You pull on your damaged shoes, open the door, and step back into the street. Behind you, your family continues eating. Ahead of you, the market is beginning to panic. And in your stomach, breakfast settles with all the confidence of a bad decision. 5 streets designed by someone who hated ankles. You leave the house with 3 coins, a damaged shoe, and strict instructions not to touch anyone. Within 10 steps, someone walks directly into you. The man apologizes, then immediately sneezes into his hand. You move away so quickly that you nearly step into the gutter. This would be unfortunate because the gutter currently contains rainwater, vegetable peelings, animal droppings, wood shavings, kitchen waste, and an object you decide not to identify before breakfast has fully settled. The street twists ahead of you, narrow and damp between rows of timber-framed houses. It was not designed so much as gradually agreed upon by generations of people placing buildings, wherever another building was not already standing. There are no straight lines. There is no pavement in the modern sense. There is only mud, stones, holes, slopes, wooden boards, and the quiet understanding that your ankles are responsible for their own survival. The upper stories of the houses project over the street, each floor extending slightly farther than the one below. In places, the rooftops lean so close together that neighbors could exchange bread without leaving their windows. Or insults. Insults require less upper body strength. You step around a puddle and land in another puddle disguised as solid ground. Cold water enters through the split sole of your shoe. Your foot makes a soft squelching sound. This will continue for the rest of the day. Ahead, a servant empties a basin into the street after shouting a warning. The warning arrives approximately half a second before the water. You flatten yourself against a wall while the contents splash onto the stones. At least you hope it was only water. Medieval towns do have rules about waste disposal. Officials fine people for blocking streets, dumping refuse in forbidden places, or failing to clean the area outside their homes. Certain trades are pushed toward rivers or the edges of town because of the smells and waste they produce. But laws and reality are distant relatives who exchange polite letters and rarely visit. A pig trots past you. It has escaped from somewhere and moves with the relaxed confidence of an animal that knows nobody has time to organize a proper pursuit. A boy runs after it carrying a rope. Stop that pig. The pig ignores him. So does everyone else. Farther down the lane, a woman sweeps dirt from her doorway into the street. Across from her, another woman sweeps it back. This appears to be an established local system. You pass workshops opening for the day. A blacksmith's hammer rings against metal. A carpenter planes a wooden board. A tanner's apprentice carries a dripping hide through an alley, surrounding himself with a smell so powerful that people step aside before they even see him. If bad air truly causes disease, the entire tanning profession should have vanished centuries ago. Yet there he is. Healthy, cheerful, and smelling like a swamp, has taken legal action against humanity. The plague has changed the street without emptying it. People still work. Carts still move. Children still chase one another between doorways. But everyone watches everyone else. A cough makes heads turn. A pale face creates space in a crowd. A woman carrying a basket pauses to inspect a swelling on her wrist, then relaxes when she realizes it is only an insect bite. You inspect your own wrist immediately. Nothing. Probably. A cart approaches from behind, its wheels grinding against the stones. You press into a doorway to let it pass. The driver carries sacks of grain, and several people follow him toward the market, asking prices before he has even stopped. One man grabs the back of the cart. The driver strikes his hand with a switch. Nobody argues. Food has begun to make people impolite. More impolite. Near the public well, a line has formed. Women lower buckets, fill jugs, trade news, and pretend not to notice when someone takes longer than usual to climb the steps. A city depends on these wells, fountains, conduits, and nearby streams. Clean water is valuable, though not every source remains clean after passing through streets filled with workshops, animals, and several thousand citizens treating drainage as a personal creative project. You consider stopping for a drink. Then you notice a dead rat beside the well. It lies near the wall, stiff and untouched. Another rests beneath a cart several yards away. You have seen dead rats before. Cats kill them, dogs kill them, carts crush them. Still, two in the same street feels unpleasant. A woman notices you staring. Bad sign, she mutters. What is? She points upward. A crow sits on a roof. Apparently she means the crow. You nod because correcting superstition requires confidence you do not possess. The market square appears ahead, louder than the surrounding lanes. Voices rise, bells ring, animals complain. Merchants shout prices with the enthusiasm of people who have recently doubled them. You tighten your grip on the coins. Behind you, the bells continue. Beneath your feet, the street shifts from mud to loose stone and back again. You have survived the journey without falling, being struck by sewage, losing your money, or accidentally purchasing a pig. By medieval standards, the morning is going extremely well. 6. The market starts holding its breath. The market square is louder than the surrounding streets, but not in the usual way. Normally, the noise rolls over you in cheerful layers. Fishmongers slap silver bodies onto wooden boards. Bakers call out the price of fresh loaves. Chickens object to commerce in general. Merchants praise their cloth, their cheese, their spices, and occasionally their own honesty, which is always the most suspicious product on display. Today, every sound feels sharper. Voices rise too quickly. Arguments begin before prices are even announced. People move from stall to stall with the nervous energy of guests at a wedding who have just noticed the bride climbing out of a window. You enter the square and immediately see 3 empty tables. The fish seller is absent. So is the old woman who usually sells garlic, herbs, and opinions about everyone's posture. A cloth merchant is packing away his finest wool, even though the morning has barely begun. Where are you going? A customer asks. My wife is ill. The merchant does not look at him. He folds the cloth faster. Nobody asks what kind of illness. The customer steps backward anyway. You continue toward the grain stalls, passing baskets of apples, onions, cabbages, dried beans, and eggs. There is food, but less than usual. Gaps appear between the displays, and customers gather around those gaps as if staring at empty boards might encourage more flour to appear. A baker stands behind several loaves with both arms folded. "How much?" asks a woman beside you. He names a price. She laughs. He does not. Yesterday, the same loaf cost nearly half as much. She accuses him of robbery. He explains that grain costs more. Cart drivers are refusing the road. 2 assistants have failed to arrive, and firewood is becoming difficult to obtain. She accuses him of explaining robbery. A small crowd forms. You decide to keep walking before the discussion becomes physical or, worse, democratic. At the grain stall, sacks are stacked behind a broad merchant with a red face and a leather cap. You ask for flour. He studies your coins. That buys half the usual amount. Yesterday it bought more. Yesterday was yesterday. This is economically accurate and emotionally unhelpful. You ask about beans. He has beans, but they have also discovered their value overnight. Salt is nearly gone. Several customers press closer behind you. Your aunt told you not to touch anyone, but the market has interpreted personal space as an inefficient use of public property. An elbow rests against your back. A basket strikes your knee. Someone breathes directly onto your neck. Then a man nearby coughs. The crowd opens around him instantly. It is almost beautiful. One moment, everyone is compressed together like grain in a sack. The next, a clear circle appears in the middle of the market. The coughing man raises both hands. "Smoke," he says. "It is only smoke." Nobody moves closer. He coughs again. Someone abandons a cabbage while retreating. The man looks offended, but he also leaves quickly, which suggests he understands the arrangement. You buy a small measure of flour and a handful of beans. The merchant wraps nothing. You have brought your own cloth bag because medieval shops do not hand out convenient paper packages decorated with reassuring promises about freshness. As he pours the beans, you notice him glance toward the gate. Everyone is doing it. A butcher pauses with his knife raised. A woman selling candles turns her head. 2 city officers have entered the square. One carries a written notice. The other carries a staff and the expression of a man who expects people to dislike the notice. They stop beside the market cross. The officer with the paper clears his throat. Conversations fade. Even the chickens seem briefly prepared to listen. He announces that travelers from certain infected districts may be refused entry. Inns must report sick guests. Householders are expected to notify parish officials when serious illness appears. Waste must be removed from streets, animals kept under control, and gatherings limited where possible. This last instruction is delivered to several hundred people, standing shoulder to shoulder. The irony is allowed to remain unaddressed. Questions erupt immediately. Which districts are infected? How will illness be recognized? Who will inspect the inns? Will the gates close? Will merchants still be allowed through? Will the city compensate traders for lost goods? The officers provide answers in the traditional official manner, slowly, vaguely, and with growing resentment toward the existence of questions. Someone shouts that the sickness comes from foreign spices. A spice merchant objects. Someone else blames cats. A woman holding a large cat objects more forcefully. The officers repeat that everyone should remain calm. This is the first reliable sign that calm is no longer available. You tie your bag shut and move away from the crowd. Around you, merchants begin hiding extra stock beneath tables. Customers count coins. Apprentices are sent running home with messages. A man buys 12 onions despite clearly needing perhaps 2. The market remains open. The stalls remain full enough to pretend nothing has changed. But the square has started holding its breath. And you realize that fear does not empty a city all at once. First, it changes the price of bread. 7. The invisible passenger in the straw. You leave the market carrying less food than expected and considerably more anxiety than requested. The cloth bag feels light against your hip. The square behind you remains crowded, but people now move with purpose. Servants hurry home. Merchants cover goods. Customers clutch sacks as though flour has recently become a precious metal. You take a narrower street to avoid the worst of the crowd. This leads past several warehouses near the city wall, where grain, wool, timber, wine, and other goods are stored before being sold or transported elsewhere. It also leads past rats. You see the first one beneath a cart. It lies on its side near a broken sack of barley, small paws curled toward its belly. A second rat is stretched beside the wall. Farther ahead, a boy uses a stick to push another into the gutter. "Don't touch it," his mother says. "I'm not." He continues touching it with the stick, because children have always treated technical definitions as tools of negotiation. You step around the body. Dead rats are unpleasant, but they are not extraordinary. Cities contain animals, animals die, and nobody has yet invented a department that arrives in a clean vehicle wearing protective clothing to remove suspicious rodents. Still, there seem to be more of them lately. The grain warehouses are perfect homes for rats. They provide food, darkness, warmth, nesting material, and almost no meaningful supervision. Rats squeeze through holes in walls, hide beneath floors, climb through rafters, and chew into sacks with the confidence of creatures who have never received an invoice. Cats catch some. Traps catch others. People poison them when they can. But rats breed faster than household complaints can be submitted. As you pass an open warehouse door, a laborer drags out another dead one by its tail. He throws it onto a small pile. "Strange," he mutters. "What is? Never seen so many die together." You look at the pile. There are at least 8. A sensible person might recognize this as important. Unfortunately, nobody knows why it is important. The true danger is even smaller than the rats. Fleas live in their fur, feeding on blood. When infected rodents begin to die, hungry fleas search for other animals nearby. Dogs, cats, livestock. People. You cannot see this process. You cannot hear it. There is no dark cloud moving through the street, no trumpet announcing that bacteria have entered the neighborhood. There is only a flea jumping from one warm body to another. A tiny passenger changing vehicles. You scratch your ankle. The movement is automatic. Fleas are an ordinary irritation. They live in bedding, clothing, straw, floor coverings, animal fur, and the seams of garments. People remove them, crush them, comb them out, wash when possible, change straw, air blankets, and complain. Then the fleas return. They are persistent, like damp, or relatives who arrive before supper. A dog runs past you, stopping to sniff one of the dead rats. You wave it away with your foot. It growls. You decide the dog has made an informed personal choice and continue walking. Near the stable, workers unload hay from a cart. Dry stalks scatter across the street. One bundle is carried indoors and dropped beside several horses. Fleas and rodents travel in cargo like this. Grain, cloth, straw, baggage, and animal bedding move between ships, carts, warehouses, inns, houses, and markets. The city's trade has made it wealthy. It has also connected every doorway to distant places. The same roads that bring wine, salt, spices, wool, pilgrims, and news can bring disease. This is globalization without customer support. You pass a porter resting against the wall. He rubs his neck. Bitten, another man asks. Flea. Better a flea than the sickness. Both men laugh. The joke is not as comforting as they think. At the end of the street, you stop to adjust your damaged shoe. The split sole has widened, and bits of straw cling to your wet stocking. You pull them free. Something tiny jumps from the cloth. You slap your leg. Miss. You slap again. Still nothing. A woman carrying firewood stares at you. Dancing, she asks. Flea. She nods sympathetically and keeps walking. There is no alarm in her face. Why would there be? A flea is too small to fear. It has no teeth you can see, no claws, no roar, no weapon, no uniform, and no official seal authorizing disaster. You stand, brush off your clothing, and continue home. Behind you, another laborer adds a rat to the pile. Ahead of you, straw spills from an open doorway. Somewhere inside your sleeve, something begins to crawl. The city is watching its gates for an enemy. But the enemy has already entered. It is smaller than a grain of barley. And it has found you comfortably warm. 8. Your neighbor develops a very bad month. You reach your street with flour, beans, wet shoes, and the uncomfortable feeling that something may still be crawling inside your sleeve. Before you can investigate, you notice a crowd outside your neighbor's house. Not a large crowd, a careful crowd. People stand in a loose half-circle several steps from the doorway, leaning forward to see while keeping their feet prepared to carry them somewhere safer. Your neighbor's wife stands at the entrance. Her hair is uncovered, which is unusual. Her face is pale. She grips the doorframe with one hand and speaks rapidly to an older woman holding a basket of herbs. He was well yesterday, she says. He worked all morning. The older woman nods with the grave authority of someone who has brought leaves to a medical emergency. You stop. Your neighbor is the red-faced carpenter who lives beside your family. He repairs stools, chests, carts, shutters, and anything else made of wood that has accepted defeat. Yesterday afternoon, he was outside arguing with a customer over the price of a table. The customer claimed one leg was shorter than the others. Your neighbor explained that the floor was crooked. Both men were probably correct. Now he is sick. You consider walking past. Your aunt told you not to touch anyone. She did not specifically forbid observing them from a doorway, which is how many poor decisions begin. You approach the crowd. What happened, you ask. 5 people answer at once. He has a fever. He has been poisoned. He ate bad fish. He breathed corrupted air near the southern wall. He was cursed by a widow after refusing to repair her cupboard. The widow is standing nearby and looks pleased that her reputation has become efficient. Your neighbor's wife sees you. Help me lift him, she says. The crowd immediately becomes fascinated by distant architecture. You place your bag beside the wall and enter. The room is hotter than yours. The shutters are closed and a small fire burns beneath a pot filled with herbs. Smoke gathers near the ceiling, mixing with the smell of sweat, vinegar, damp wool, and fear. Your neighbor lies on a mattress near the hearth. His face is flushed. His hair sticks to his forehead. Although the room is warm, he shivers beneath 2 blankets. His teeth chatter. You have never seen a large man look so small. He fell when he tried to stand, his wife says. You kneel beside him. His eyes open, but they do not settle on you. Cold, he whispers. His skin feels hot enough to warm bread. You and his wife lift him farther onto the mattress. His arm hangs heavily over your shoulder, and for several seconds your face is close to his. You can smell the sourness of his breath. You try not to breathe. This is not medically useful, but it gives you something to do. The older woman enters and begins placing herbs into the pot. She says the smoke will purify the room. Someone else opens the shutter and says fresh air is needed. The older woman closes it again. Within moments, the household has divided into two competing schools of window management. Your neighbor groans. His wife pulls back the blanket to adjust his shirt. That is when she sees the swelling. It sits high inside his thigh near the groin, a hard raised lump beneath the skin. She touches it gently. He cries out. Everyone stops arguing. The older woman leans closer. Her expression changes. Do not press it, she says. This is the first advice anyone has given that appears immediately sensible. Another swelling is found beneath his arm. The room grows very quiet. Outside, someone asks what is happening. Nobody answers. You know these signs from the rumors. Fever, weakness, painful swellings. The sickness that was supposedly at the gate is now lying on a straw mattress one wall away from your bed. Your neighbor's wife begins to cry, but only for a moment. Then she wipes her face and asks what must be done. The older woman recommends calling a physician. A man outside says the physicians are overwhelmed. Someone suggests fetching a priest. Another person says this will frighten the patient. The patient, meanwhile, is drifting in and out of consciousness and seems unlikely to object to the administrative sequence. You stand. Your hands are damp with his sweat. There is no soap nearby. His wife gives you a basin and pours vinegar over your fingers because vinegar is strong-smelling, available, and therefore trusted. You rub your hands until the skin stings. It feels useful. That is not the same as being useful. You collect your food bag from outside. The crowd parts to let you pass. They no longer look curious. They look at your hands. You return home through your own doorway and find your aunt waiting. What happened? You place the flour on the table. The carpenter is ill. She looks toward the shared wall. Another bell begins somewhere across the city. This time it does not sound distant. 9. The bubo makes its entrance. Your aunt does not ask whether the carpenter is seriously ill. She already knows. The room has gone quiet in the particular way rooms do, when everyone is thinking the same frightening thought, and hoping somebody else will say it first. Your uncle looks toward the wall separating the two houses. It is thin timber packed with plaster, straw, and several decades of private arguments. You can hear movement on the other side. A basin scrapes across the floor. Someone speaks softly. Then the carpenter cries out again. The sound passes through the wall with uncomfortable ease. Your aunt takes your wrists and examines your hands. Did you touch him? You consider lying. This would be difficult, since half the street watched you carry him. Yes. She pours more vinegar into a bowl and tells you to wash again. The liquid is cold and sharp. It finds every cut in your skin, including several you did not know you had. You scrub until your knuckles turn red. Your uncle says you should burn your shirt. Your aunt says you own 2 shirts. Your uncle suggests burning only the sleeves. This is why he is not in charge of tailoring. Next door, the carpenter's wife sends for a physician. She also sends for a priest, an apothecary, her sister, and anyone else who might bring certainty into the house. Certainty does not arrive. The swelling does. By afternoon, the lump in the carpenter's groin has grown larger and more painful. Another beneath his arm rises under the skin, hot and tender. These swellings sit where lymph nodes cluster, though nobody in your street uses that term. People call them kernels, boils, tokens, plague swellings. Later generations will remember them as buboes. The word sounds almost harmless. A bubo could be a small dog, or a cheerful kitchen servant. It does not sound like a hard, burning mass beneath the skin that makes a grown man scream when the blanket brushes against it. You return to the doorway because the physician has arrived. He is younger than expected and looks tired enough to have aged during the walk from the previous patient. His robe is ordinary. His face is uncovered. There is no long beaked mask filled with herbs, because that dramatic costume belongs mostly to later centuries. In 1348, medical terror has not yet developed branding. The physician kneels beside the carpenter and feels his pulse. He asks when the fever began, what the patient ate, whether he has vomited, whether his bowels have moved, and what his urine looks like. The carpenter's wife answers each question. Then the physician examines the swelling. He touches it lightly. The carpenter jerks so violently that two people must hold him still. The skin over the lump is stretched and darkened. Nearby, smaller marks have appeared, reddish at first, then purple. Some people will later associate plague with blackened skin, bleeding beneath the surface, or tissue dying at the fingers and toes. Not every patient develops the same signs, and not every dark mark means the same thing. You do not know any of that. You only know the carpenter's body appears to be turning against him. The physician speaks quietly about corrupted humors and dangerous heat gathering in the body. He says the swelling may need to be drawn outward with a poultice. Someone asks whether it should be cut open. The physician pauses. This is not reassuring. He says perhaps if it softens. The older woman with the herbs recommends placing a warm onion against it. Your aunt, listening from the doorway, nods as though finally a serious professional has joined the discussion. The carpenter wakes suddenly. His eyes move around the room without recognizing anyone. He tries to sit up. Then he coughs. Everyone steps backward. The physician leans close, listening to his breathing. The cough is dry for now, but the man's chest rises too quickly. Plague can remain concentrated in the lymphatic system, producing bubonic disease. It can spread into the bloodstream. It can also infect the lungs, becoming pneumonic plague, which may pass between people through respiratory droplets. You do not know which form is before you. You barely understand that there are forms. The physician orders the windows opened, then changes his mind and asks for them partly closed to prevent cold air striking the patient. Your uncle whispers that this is precisely what he has been saying all morning. Nobody rewards him. The carpenter's wife places a cloth over her husband's forehead. He begins muttering about the unfinished table in his workshop. One leg is shorter than the others, he says. Even now, he is still arguing with the customer. You stand near the doorway, watching the swelling rise beneath his skin. Yesterday, the plague was a rumor. This morning, it was a fever. Now it has a shape, and it is the size of a hen's egg. 11. A treatment plan based on blood and confidence. The physician has barely disappeared into the crowd when the carpenter's wife unfolds his instructions. She turns the page one way, then the other. The writing remains unreadable from every direction. Fortunately, the apprentice from the apothecary arrives before anyone attempts to interpret the prescription as a map. He is a thin young man carrying a basket filled with jars, folded cloths, dried roots, and the anxious expression of someone who has spent the morning entering houses where everyone is sweating. He places the basket beside the mattress and begins unpacking. First comes a jar of ointment, then a packet of powdered herbs, then a small ceramic cup, finally a narrow metal blade. Everyone looks at the blade. The apprentice notices. For bleeding, he explains. This does not improve the room. The physician believes the carpenter's body may contain corrupted blood that must be released before the illness spreads further. Medical traditions inherited from ancient writers teach that health depends on balance. If the patient is too hot, too cold, too moist, too dry, too full of blood, or insufficiently cooperative with the moon, something must be adjusted. The carpenter is certainly too hot. He is also weak, pale, confused, and losing fluids through sweat. Removing blood from him seems rather like repairing a leaking roof by taking away more tiles. But the physician is educated, the apprentice has equipment, and nobody else has offered anything more convincing. The carpenter's wife agrees. A basin is brought. The apprentice ties a strip of cloth around the patient's arm and searches for a vein. Your neighbor barely reacts. His eyes remain half closed. His lips move as though he is speaking, but the words are too soft to understand. The blade makes a quick cut. Dark blood runs into the basin. Everyone watches. There is something reassuring about visible treatment. The illness is invisible, mysterious, and uncontrollable. The blood, at least, can be seen leaving. Perhaps the poison is leaving with it. Perhaps the fever will break. Perhaps doing something is better than standing beside the bed waiting. The apprentice allows only a modest amount to flow. Even within medieval medicine, practitioners disagree about bleeding plague patients. Some warn that too much blood weakens the body. Others argue that the timing and location of the cut must correspond to the swelling. Medical debate continues while the patient performs the simpler task of dying. The apprentice binds the arm. Next, he prepares a poultice. He mixes herbs, fat, and warm liquid into a thick paste. The smell is sharp and bitter. He spreads the mixture onto cloth and places it over the bubo beneath the carpenter's arm. The patient groans. The apprentice explains that the poultice may draw corruption toward the surface. The older woman suggests adding roasted onion. Your aunt, listening from the doorway, looks ready to award her a university position. A second preparation is offered as a drink. The carpenter's wife lifts his head, while the apprentice tips the cup toward his mouth. Most of the liquid runs down his chin. He coughs. The apprentice pulls back. For a moment, nobody breathes. The cough does not stop. It grows deeper, rougher, as though something inside his chest is tearing. A trace of red appears at the corner of his mouth. His wife wipes it away before the children can see. You see it. So does the apprentice. His hands move faster after that. He closes the jars, folds the cloths, and gives hurried instructions. The poultice must be warmed. The patient should drink broth. His bedding should be aired. Strong emotions must be avoided. The carpenter's wife looks around the room. Her husband is coughing blood. A priest is on the way. Neighbors are gathered outside, discussing whether the entire house should be burned. Avoiding strong emotions may require more equipment than the apprentice has brought. Before leaving, he places a small charm beside the bed. It contains written words of prayer folded inside cloth. Medicine and faith do not occupy separate worlds here. A physician may study ancient texts and astrology. An apothecary may sell herbs beside amulets. A priest may recommend practical cleaning while also preparing the soul. Everyone uses every tool available. The problem is that none of the tools includes antibiotics. The carpenter opens his eyes. For one clear moment, he recognizes his wife. "I'm thirsty," he says. She reaches for water. The apprentice catches her arm. "Only a little." She gives him a little. He drinks it all and asks for more. Outside, another family calls for the apprentice. He gathers his basket. "How long until the medicine works?" the carpenter's wife asks. The apprentice looks at the blood in the basin, then at the swelling, then at the patient. "Soon," he says. It is not an answer, but it sounds like one. And sometimes, when hope is running out, confidence is simply the last treatment left in the bag. 12. The apothecary's shelf of expensive optimism. The apprentice has left behind enough instructions to confuse 3 households, and your aunt decides somebody must visit the apothecary himself. That somebody is you. Apparently, touching one plague patient has qualified you for promotion. The carpenter needs more vinegar, sage, rue, oil, clean cloth, and something written on the prescription that might be figs or frogs. You hope for figs. The apothecary's shop stands near the market square beneath a painted wooden sign showing a mortar and pestle. Usually, the doorway is crowded with servants purchasing spices, housewives asking for cough syrups, and elderly men explaining their digestion in unnecessary detail. Today, the line stretches into the street. Everyone wants protection. A merchant demands a cordial against poisoned air. A mother asks for medicine for her feverish child. A priest needs incense. A nervous tailor wishes to purchase every clove of garlic in the building. The apothecary himself stands behind a long counter surrounded by shelves. Jars climb toward the ceiling. Bundles of herbs hang from beams. Small boxes contain powders, resins, seeds, gums, roots, minerals, and substances imported across distances so great that their price has become part of their medical effect. The shop smells powerful enough to erase memory. You detect vinegar, rosemary, lavender, smoke, honey, wax, garlic, dried flowers, animal fat, and something bitter that seems to be judging you. The apothecary takes the physician's note and reads it without turning it upside down. This confirms he is a professional. He gathers ingredients while speaking quickly. Sage, rue, myrrh if you can afford it. You cannot. A little camphor if he has any left. He does not. Rose water. Too expensive. Vinegar. Available, although the price has risen since morning because apparently vinegar has learned about the plague. He recommends a scented ball that can be carried near the nose. It contains herbs, resin, and spices pressed together into something resembling a very small festive pudding. How does it help, you ask? It strengthens the heart and guards against foul air. How much? He names the price. You decide your heart will have to remain emotionally vulnerable. Instead, you purchase a cheaper bundle of rosemary and juniper. The apothecary also offers powdered gemstones. Ground emerald, he says, may resist poison. You look at your coins. Your coins look back. It is comforting to know that surviving the plague is available in several pricing tiers. At the far end of the counter, an assistant mixes a syrup with honey. Another crushes dried roots using a heavy stone mortar. The rhythmic pounding continues without pause. Orders pile up. Every remedy must be measured, mixed, heated, wrapped, labeled, and paid for. The apothecary's work depends on trade networks now threatened by the same disease he is attempting to treat. Spices arrive by ship. Resins cross mountains. Sugar remains expensive. Even humble herbs require gardens, labor, drying space, and people healthy enough to gather them. A woman begins crying because the medicine she needs is gone. The apothecary offers a substitute. She asks whether it works as well. He says it has been recommended by respected authorities. This means no. But politely, when your turn is nearly finished, the apothecary leans closer. Has the patient coughed blood? You hesitate. Yes. He stops wrapping the herbs. His assistants keep working, but more quietly. The apothecary advises you to burn the cloths used near the patient's mouth. Keep children away. Wash the room with vinegar. Avoid sleeping near him. The carpenter's entire family sleeps in one room. You explain this. The apothecary looks tired. Then sleep as far away as possible. This may mean 3 feet instead of 2. He hands you the package. Before leaving, you ask whether the remedies will save the carpenter. The apothecary wipes powder from his hands. They may comfort him. Again, not an answer. Outside the shop, customers continue waiting. One man clutches a bag of herbs to his chest, as though it contains the secret of eternal life. Another complains loudly that the price of cloves has tripled. A servant carries away a costly mixture prepared for a wealthy household, complete with imported spices and a silver container. You carry vinegar in a clay bottle. Disease may visit every class, but treatment still arrives according to income. You tuck the rosemary beneath your nose and begin walking home. The scent is clean, sharp, and pleasant. For several breaths, the city no longer smells of smoke, refuse, animals, sweat, fear, and death. Perhaps that is the real medicine. Not a cure, just a small, expensive moment in which the world smells less terrible. 13. Smoke, herbs, and the war against bad air. By the time you return, your street has begun fighting the atmosphere. Small fires burn in metal pans outside several doorways. People toss juniper, rosemary, old wood, and anything else fragrant enough to suggest authority onto the flames. Smoke curls between the houses. The air becomes so thick that everyone begins coughing. This causes immediate concern. Then everyone remembers the smoke and returns to coughing with greater confidence. The belief is simple enough. Disease may come through corrupted air. Perhaps the atmosphere has been poisoned by rotting matter. Perhaps unusual weather has disturbed the balance of nature. Perhaps earthquakes have released dangerous vapors from the earth. Perhaps the arrangement of planets has spoiled the air across entire regions. These explanations sound strange to modern ears, but you live in a world where smell often accompanies danger. Rotting food smells. Blocked drains smell. Dead animals smell. Sick rooms smell. Tanneries smell like punishment has become a trade. It is reasonable to notice the connection. The mistake is believing the smell itself is the enemy. You place the apothecary's herbs beside the carpenter's bed. His wife dips cloth into vinegar and wipes the table, the door frame, the basin, and eventually the same door frame again, because fear has no clear stopping point. Your aunt burns rosemary near the window. Your uncle objects that the smoke cannot leave because the shutter is closed. Your aunt opens it. He objects that corrupted air can now enter. The argument has returned to its original position and may continue until one of them dies naturally at the age of 90. Outside, city servants move through the lane shouting instructions. Householders must remove refuse. Dead animals must be taken away. Gutters must be cleared. Pigs must be confined. Nobody knows where the escaped pig from this morning has gone, but several citizens express strong opinions about what should happen when it is found. You join others scraping mud and waste away from the fronts of houses. The work is practical. Cleaner streets reduce certain risks, discourage some pests, and make movement easier. It does not stop the plague. Still, the city looks briefly organized. Buckets pass from hand to hand. Brooms scrape stone. Ashes spread over wet patches. A boy gathers dead rats using a shovel and drops them into a cart. Nobody wearing protective clothing supervises him. He is 12. This is considered sufficient training. The bodies are carried away for burning or disposal outside the busiest streets. Whether this helps depends greatly on how the rats and their fleas are handled. Hungry fleas are not impressed by municipal enthusiasm. Near the market, officials order larger fires lit to cleanse the air. Aromatic substances are burned when available. Wealthier households fumigate rooms with costly perfumes. Poorer families use whatever they have: straw, herbs, damp wood, and optimism. You carry a small bundle beneath your nose. The rosemary makes breathing pleasant for several minutes. Then smoke enters your eyes. You begin crying. A neighbor assumes you are mourning the carpenter and embraces you. Your aunt told you not to touch anyone. The day continues to reject this instruction. As evening approaches, the whole street smells like a forest fire occurring inside a kitchen. Doors are marked in no official way. Red crosses and rigid household quarantine rules belong more clearly to later plague regulations in some cities. Here, in 1348, restrictions are improvised, inconsistent, and constantly argued over. Everyone creates private rules. Do not visit the sick, unless the sick are family. Do not touch strangers, unless the stranger is selling bread. Avoid crowds, except at church. Do not breathe foul air. Breathe this smoke instead. A man walks past carrying a cloth bag filled with herbs around his neck. Another holds a sponge soaked in vinegar beneath his nose. A woman has sewn fragrant leaves into her children's clothing. The children smell like soup. The carpenter continues coughing next door. His wife burns another bundle of juniper. For a moment, the smoke hides the room. You can barely see the bed, barely see the patient, barely see the fear on anyone's face. Then the smoke thins. Nothing has changed. The bubo remains. The fever remains. The bells remain. But the room smells of rosemary now. And when you possess no power over death, making death smell slightly better can feel like a victory. 14. The streets begin to fight back. Let's talk about sanitation. This will not be pleasant. Before the siege, the city already had a complicated relationship with cleanliness. Waste was carried to pits, dumped into channels, thrown onto refuse heaps, or removed by workers whose profession guaranteed they were never invited to sit near the food. It was not elegant, but it mostly functioned. Now the gates are closed, the population has swollen, the animals are crowded into every available space, and nothing can be carried safely outside. The city has begun digesting itself. Every household produces waste. Chamber pots fill overnight. Cooking scraps pile up. Ash spills from hearths. Horses, cattle, pigs, goats, chickens, dogs, and people all contribute to the streets with impressive consistency. The lanes are no longer merely dirty. They are active. You leave home one morning carrying an empty water jar and immediately step into something warm. You do not look down. There are moments when knowledge adds nothing. The main drainage channel through your district has stopped flowing. Refugees built shelters over part of it. Rubble from the bombardment blocks another section. A dead goat has become involved farther downhill. Wastewater now gathers in shallow pools between houses. Some of it is gray. Some of it is green. One puddle has bubbles. Children are ordered not to play near it, which guarantees they spend the morning throwing sticks into it from a slightly greater distance. City officials organize cleaning crews. You are assigned to one. Of course you are. A man hands you a shovel and points toward a mound near the market square. It contains spoiled vegetables, broken pottery, straw, manure, fish remains, ash, rags, and several objects best described as historical questions. The smell is powerful enough to alter your beliefs. You cover your mouth with cloth. This traps the smell beside your face. The crew loads waste into carts and drags it toward designated pits inside the walls. These pits were never intended to receive the output of an entire trapped city. They fill quickly. New pits are dug in courtyards, abandoned gardens, and ruined buildings. Lime is scattered where available. Straw and earth are thrown over the worst deposits. Every solution simply moves the smell somewhere else. Public latrines become disasters. People wait in line outside wooden structures that sway when the wind blows and leak when it rains. Privacy is limited to avoiding eye contact. One latrine near the southern wall collapses. Nobody is killed. Several people briefly wish they had been. The wealthy complain that the smell reaches their homes. The poor explain that the smell lives in theirs. Arguments break out over where rubbish may be dumped. One street accuses another of emptying buckets uphill, so everything flows downward at night. The accused street denies this. Then it begins raining, and evidence arrives. The market square becomes a shallow river of mud, dung, vegetable peelings, and household waste. Residents place boards across the worst sections, creating narrow walkways where everyone must balance while carrying food, water, or children. Falling off is now considered a medical event. Flies gather wherever the weather is warm enough. Rats multiply among the grain stores and rubbish heaps. Dogs drag scraps through alleys. Pigs, when allowed loose, eat some of the waste and spread the remainder with professional enthusiasm. The city orders animals confined. The animals disagree. Inside your crowded home, conditions are not much better. Water is too scarce for proper washing. Bedding remains damp. Bowls are wiped rather than cleaned. Clothes are hung near the hearth, where smoke adds a fresh layer of preservation. Everyone smells of sweat, ash, wet wool, and fear. Nobody notices their own odor anymore. Only new odors receive attention. Then people begin getting sick. At first it is stomach pain, then vomiting, then diarrhea. A child in the next house develops a fever. 2 refugees sleeping near the church cannot keep food down. The well-keeper warns that buckets must not touch the street. Rumors spread that the enemy has poisoned the air. The real explanation is less dramatic. Thousands of people are living beside their own waste. The city council orders stricter cleaning. Fines are announced for dumping refuse in the streets. Guards patrol the worst districts. One man is fined for emptying a chamber pot from an upper window. He argues that he shouted a warning first. The person below argues that the warning arrived after the contents. By evening, you return home exhausted, carrying the smell of the city on your boots, clothes, and soul. Outside the walls, the enemy continues waiting. Inside, the streets have joined the siege. And unlike the soldiers, they are already everywhere. 15. When sickness joins the siege. The first deaths are blamed on bad food. This is understandable. Most of the food is bad. A child near the western gate develops a fever after eating spoiled peas. An old woman begins vomiting beside the church. 3 soldiers complain of stomach cramps after drinking from a shallow cistern. For a day or two, everyone treats these as separate misfortunes. Then the coughing begins. It starts in the crowded shelters, where refugees sleep packed together on straw beneath church roofs and market awnings. One person coughs through the night. By morning, 5 others are coughing. Within a week, the sound follows you everywhere. Dry coughs, wet coughs, small coughs from children, deep, rattling coughs from people who have begun making peace with several personal regrets. You hear them through walls, beneath floors, across courtyards, and during prayer. The entire city sounds like an elderly cart attempting to climb a hill. Healers move from house to house carrying satchels filled with herbs, cloth, knives, cups, ointments, and tremendous confidence. One examines your cousin's youngest child, who has developed a fever. The healer presses a hand to the child's forehead, studies his tongue, smells his breath, and asks several questions about the moon. You had hoped for something more directly related to the fever. He explains that the child's humors may be unbalanced. This means there may be too much blood, phlegm, yellow bile or black bile inside him. Apparently, the body is less a human being and more a badly managed stew. The treatment begins with an herbal drink. It smells like boiled grass mixed with offense. The child refuses it. Everyone explains that medicine is not supposed to taste pleasant, a principle healers have embraced with almost suspicious enthusiasm. Other patients receive poultices, wine, honey, vinegar, prayers, or bleeding. Leeches appear wherever leeches can be found, which is impressive considering nobody has enough clean water, but somehow there is always a damp container of medical worms. A soldier with fever is bled from the arm. He becomes pale and collapses. The healer announces that the treatment has revealed his weakness. This feels unfair to the soldier. Churches and guild halls are turned into makeshift infirmaries. Straw bedding covers the floors. Volunteers carry water, empty basins, prepare broth, and wash cloths whenever water can be spared. The sick lie shoulder to shoulder. Some recover. Many do not. There are no antibiotics, no laboratory tests, no understanding of bacteria or viruses. Illness may be blamed on foul air, spoiled food, divine punishment, poisoned wells, unlucky stars, or the presence of someone from a neighboring region whose accent has always seemed questionable. The city council orders smoke fires lit in certain streets to purify the air. Herbs are burned indoors. Vinegar is sprinkled on floors. People carry bunches of rosemary or other strong-smelling plants beneath their noses, which does little to stop disease, but makes dying smell slightly more organized. Fear spreads faster than the illness. Families hide sick relatives because they worry they will be removed from the home. Neighbors avoid houses where coughing can be heard. Merchants refuse coins handed over by visibly ill customers, although they usually accept them after wiping them on their sleeves. Rumors say an entire shelter near the southern wall has been sealed. Another rumor says bodies are being buried at night. This one is true. The churchyard is filling. Gravediggers work after dark because daylight is needed for wall repairs and because long funeral processions damage morale. Bodies are wrapped in cloth when cloth is available. When it is not, blankets, sacks, or cloaks are used. Families receive only a brief prayer. There is no time for more. One morning, the bells ring slowly. Not the alarm. Not the fire signal. The funeral bell. It sounds once, then again, each note spreading through the cold air above the rooftops. Nobody asks who died. There are too many possibilities. At home, the feverish child finally drinks some water and falls asleep. His breathing is shallow but steady. Everyone watches him as though attention alone might keep him alive. Outside, the enemy remains beyond the walls. Inside, sickness moves freely from room to room without needing ladders, siege engines, or permission from the guards. The city has spent weeks preparing for soldiers. It was far less prepared for a cough. 16. The church fills with fear. It is time to pray. Not because anyone has suddenly become more spiritual. Because the walls are cracking, the wells are low, the bread is shrinking, and several people have developed the deeply unsettling habit of dying. The church fills before dawn. People crowd through the doors carrying candles, children, relics, blankets, and the exhausted expressions of those who have already tried every practical solution available. The nave smells of wax, damp wool, smoke, and illness. Every bench is occupied. Families sit on the floor. Refugees press against pillars. Soldiers stand near the entrance with helmets beneath their arms, pretending not to be frightened because fear looks unprofessional in uniform. You find a place beside your cousin and the feverish child. The boy is awake now, which is encouraging. He is also coughing into your sleeve. This is less encouraging. At the altar, Priests prepare for a special mass asking for protection, mercy, victory, rain, food, health, and perhaps a slight reduction in the number of airborne stones. The list is becoming ambitious. Candles burn before painted saints. People leave coins, scraps of cloth, small loaves, and personal objects as offerings. One woman places a silver brooch before a statue. Her husband looks at the brooch, then at her, then at the empty space where their dinner money used to be. He decides this is not the moment. The priest begins speaking. His voice rises beneath the roof, echoing through the crowded church. He explains that the siege may be a test of faith, or punishment for sin, or an opportunity for courage. Possibly all three. Medieval sermons are flexible that way. He asks the city to repent. Immediately, everyone begins remembering things. Small thefts, large lies, adultery, cheating customers, watering ale, moving boundary stones, pretending not to hear a neighbor knocking during the first night of the siege. People confess quietly, loudly, sincerely, strategically, and sometimes with suspicious attention to what others are confessing. You hear a merchant admit that he used false weights. A baker admits nothing. This is noticed. After Mass, a procession forms. Priests carry crosses, banners, candles, and sacred relics through the streets. Bells ring slowly as the crowd follows, singing prayers. Some walk barefoot despite the cold. Others kneel whenever the procession stops. You join because everyone joins. Also because remaining behind might suggest that you support the enemy, disease, or both. The procession moves toward the walls. Soldiers watch from the battlements while priests bless the gates, towers, wells, granaries, and defenders. Holy water is sprinkled over stone, timber, weapons, helmets, and one confused horse. The horse appears spiritually unchanged. At the northern wall, the priest raises a relic toward the enemy camp. People whisper that it once belonged to a famous saint. Nobody is entirely sure which saint. The box is covered in gold and therefore considered persuasive. Outside, the besiegers continue building. Apparently, they have not received the theological update. Faith offers real comfort to many people. It gives structure to days that have become shapeless with fear. Morning prayer, evening prayer, bells, feast days, confession, and shared ritual remind everyone that the city is still a community. It has not yet become only a collection of hungry animals behind stone. But fear also makes religion sharper. People begin searching for reasons the city is suffering. Perhaps someone has angered God. Perhaps sinners are being protected. Perhaps a stranger has brought forbidden beliefs inside the walls. A foreign trader is accused of mocking a procession. He says he merely sneezed. The explanation is investigated. Old grudges acquire religious clothing. Neighbors report one another for blasphemy, missing Mass, working on holy days, or owning objects that look suspicious in poor lighting. The priests urge calm. Some of them at least. Others preach that victory will come only after the city purges itself of corruption. This produces several uncomfortable glances toward wealthy officials. The wealthy officials suddenly prefer sermons about patience. At night, the churches remain open. The sick lie beneath the side aisles. Refugees sleep near the doors. Candles flicker beside families praying for relatives outside the walls. You kneel beside the child and listen to the murmur of hundreds of voices. Some ask for rescue. Some ask for forgiveness. Some ask only for tomorrow. Then a siege stone strikes somewhere nearby. Dust falls from the rafters. The congregation flinches as one body. The priest pauses. Then he continues praying. Nobody leaves. Outside, the enemy has engines, soldiers, food, and time. Inside, the city has fear, stubbornness, and every saint anyone can remember. At this point, you will use whatever is available. 17. Rumors become the main food supply. By now, nobody knows what is happening. Naturally, everyone has become an expert. News enters the city through messengers, shouted reports from the walls, captured soldiers, secret letters, distant banners, and people who once spoke to someone whose brother knows a stable boy near the western gate. This produces excellent accuracy. The first rumor of the morning says a relief army is approaching. It begins near the grain market, where a woman claims her nephew saw friendly banners beyond the northern hills. Within minutes, the army has grown from several hundred riders into 20,000 heavily armed men led personally by the king. By the time the story reaches your street, they are 1 day away. By the time it reaches the church, they are arriving before lunch. People smile for the first time in weeks. Merchants lower prices slightly. Soldiers stand straighter. Someone opens a hidden jar of honey because apparently survival has now been confirmed. Then a messenger arrives at the council hall. The banners belong to enemy scouts. The honey is quietly closed again. This does not kill the rumor. It merely creates another version. The relief army is still coming, people insist. It has taken a different road. It is moving at night. It is waiting for better weather. It has already defeated part of the enemy force but wishes to remain modest about it. Hope is extremely good at changing clothes. You hear the latest reports while waiting for water. The enemy commander is sick. No dead. No recovering. No poisoned by his own cook. No, the cook was poisoned by the commander because the soup looked disloyal. A man in front of you says the besiegers have only 3 days of food left. A woman behind you asks why their cooking fires still cover half the countryside. The man explains that they are burning empty pots to fool you. This answer satisfies nobody except him. The taverns become centers of military intelligence. People gather around weak ale and discuss troop movements they cannot see. Former soldiers draw maps in spilled beer. Merchants explain siege engineering. Priests interpret unusual clouds. One elderly man has predicted the enemy will attack very soon, every day for 3 weeks, and now enjoys the confidence of someone who cannot possibly remain wrong forever. You stop at the tavern after wall duty. A stranger whispers that there is a secret tunnel beneath the eastern district. Someone else says the tunnel leads out of the city. A third man says it leads into the enemy camp. The tavern keeper says it leads to his cellar and asks everyone to stop discussing it. By evening, the tunnel contains armed spies, hidden treasure, 2 traitorous officials, and possibly a dragon. The dragon is considered unlikely. The officials are not. Official announcements do little to help. A clerk stands in the square and reads a statement from the council. Supplies remain sufficient. The walls remain strong. Negotiations are not taking place. Relief is expected. The crowd listens carefully. Then everyone translates the statement into what they believe it secretly means. Supplies remain sufficient means the grain is gone. The walls remain strong means a tower is about to collapse. Negotiations are not taking place means the gates will open tonight. Relief is expected means nobody is coming. Even truthful information now sounds suspicious because truth has begun wearing the same expression as reassurance. The guards attempt to punish people who spread dangerous stories. This creates a new rumor that the guards are hiding dangerous stories. One man is arrested for claiming the enemy has infiltrated the city disguised as monks. His arrest proves to half the market that he was correct. You begin choosing rumors according to usefulness. You believe the relief army is coming because this helps you climb the wall in the morning. You do not believe the wells are poisoned because you still need to drink. You believe the enemy is running low on food, but do not examine why their horses look better fed than you. This is not foolishness. It is emotional rationing. At home, your household gathers around the hearth to exchange the day's reports. Everyone has heard something different. Your cousin says friendly troops are 2 days away. His mother says the enemy plans a final assault tomorrow. The farmhand says a captured soldier admitted the besiegers are exhausted. The rooster has no information, but reacts strongly to every version. You lie down listening to them argue. Outside, the enemy hammers, digs, cooks, and waits. Inside, the city feeds itself on whispers. The bread may be shrinking. The rumors remain unlimited. 18 hunting for spies. Fear soon turns inward. The enemy is still outside the walls, but people begin looking for him inside cupboards, cellars, monasteries, workshops, and the facial expressions of anyone they have never liked. It begins with a fire near the eastern gate. The flames are extinguished quickly, but someone says the blaze started too neatly to be an accident. Another person remembers seeing a stranger nearby. A third insists the stranger spoke with a foreign accent. By sunset, the stranger has become an enemy agent carrying secret maps, poison, and enough lamp oil to burn the entire city. Nobody can describe his face. This makes him extremely difficult to arrest and extremely easy to recognize everywhere. The council orders tighter watches at the gates, wells, granaries, towers, and ammunition stores. Guards search wagons, inspect cellars, and question anyone wandering after dark without a convincing reason. Unfortunately, nearly everyone has an unconvincing reason. A baker's apprentice is stopped carrying flour at midnight. He explains that the bakery works through the night. The guards consider this suspicious until they remember bread. A priest is questioned near the western wall because he is holding a lantern and speaking quietly to another man. They are discussing a funeral. This is accepted, although only after the dead person is identified. You are assigned to patrol your district with the baker and the tavern man. The tavern man has received a shorter spear after nearly removing a shop sign with the first one. Your instructions are simple. Watch for strangers. Watch for signals. Watch for hidden weapons. Watch for anyone tampering with wells, gates, walls, fires, or food stores. Also watch for thieves, deserters, hoarders, and people spreading panic. Essentially, watch everyone. You begin with the rooftops. Rumors claim spies are signaling the enemy using lanterns. Every light after curfew becomes evidence. A widow places a candle in her window while tending her sick daughter, and 3 neighbors report her before the wax has melted. Guards search the house. They find 1 ill child, 2 blankets, a bowl of broth, and no strategic communication with the besieging army. The neighbors remain unconvinced. Another rumor concerns pigeons. The enemy is supposedly receiving messages tied to their legs. Residents begin trapping birds across the city. Most contain no messages. One contains a piece of string. This causes several hours of official excitement before someone remembers children exist. Suspicion settles most heavily on outsiders. Foreign merchants, pilgrims, wandering craftsmen, refugees, and anyone from a rival town are watched closely. People who once tolerated different accents now hear treason in every vowel. A cloth dealer from another region is accused after drawing a rough map in the dirt. He explains that he was showing someone where his village stood. The crowd explains that villages are exactly the sort of places found on military maps. He is taken away for questioning. Nobody knows whether he returns. Old disputes become accusations. One neighbor reports another for walking near the grain warehouse. The accused man says he was searching for his escaped pig. The neighbor says this is a convenient story. The pig is later found inside the warehouse. This proves either innocence or advanced planning. Even officials are suspected. Why did one council member argue for surrender? Why does another still have wine? Why was a gate captain seen speaking to a captured soldier? Every decision becomes evidence of betrayal because people find treason easier to accept than hunger, chance, or poor leadership. At least treason has a face. One evening, shouting erupts near the southern gate. A man has been caught with a bundle of arrows hidden beneath his cloak. The crowd gathers quickly. Some demand execution before anyone asks why he has them. The man insists he is carrying the arrows to his brother on the wall. His brother confirms this. The crowd is disappointed. Public suspicion has become entertainment, and innocence rarely provides a satisfying ending. You continue your patrol after dark. The streets are quiet except for coughing, distant hammering, and the occasional crash of a siege stone. Every doorway looks deeper than it should. Every moving shadow resembles a saboteur until it becomes a cat. Then the cat knocks over a bucket. The tavern man nearly attacks it. By the time you return home, you have found no spies. You have questioned 2 refugees, frightened a monk, searched an empty shed, and discovered that the baker snores while walking slowly. The enemy remains outside. But inside the city, trust has become another rationed resource. And everyone believes someone else is receiving too much. 19. The ground starts making noises. The first sign of trouble is a tapping beneath the floor. At least you think it is beneath the floor. It might be a rat. It might be settling stone. It might be your cousin, attempting to hide another bag of grain beneath the house. Then the tapping comes again. Slow, regular, far too patient for a rat. You stop speaking. Everyone in the room listens. The rooster tilts its head, which is not helpful but feels official. Another dull knock rises through the earth. Then another. Across the city, people have been warned to listen for digging. The enemy may be trying to mine beneath the walls, tunneling under a tower or gate until the foundations can be weakened. The idea is simple. Dig beneath something important. Support the tunnel with timber. Set the timber on fire. Allow gravity to finish the military strategy. You immediately report the sound. Within an hour, 2 soldiers, a mason, an engineer, a clerk, and a man who claims to know a great deal about soil are standing in your home. The soil expert presses his ear against the floor. Everyone watches. He listens for several moments, then announces that he hears nothing. The tapping begins again while he is still speaking. His reputation suffers. Boards are lifted, straw is pulled aside. A section of floor is cleared until damp earth lies exposed. The engineer kneels and presses a metal bowl against the ground, using it to amplify vibrations. You are impressed. Then he asks everyone to stop breathing so loudly. The entire household holds its breath. Deep below, something scrapes. The engineer's face changes. This is never reassuring. Word spreads that miners may be working beneath the eastern district. Residents are ordered from several houses near the wall. Cellars are cleared. Guards seal the lanes while teams begin digging a countermine. Naturally, they need laborers. Naturally, you are available. By afternoon, you are descending into a narrow shaft beneath a warehouse, holding a shovel and a lamp that produces more smoke than light. The tunnel is low enough that you cannot stand upright. Timber braces press against the walls. Loose soil trickles from above whenever someone moves too quickly. The air smells of damp earth, sweat, oil, and fear. Mostly fear. You crawl forward behind a miner, whose entire professional philosophy appears to be keep digging until something happens. Men work in shifts, cutting into the soil with picks and shovels. Baskets of earth are dragged backward on ropes. The tunnel grows slowly, one miserable foot at a time. Nobody knows exactly where the enemy tunnel is. You are trying to intercept a sound in the dark. It is like searching for a noisy worm with military funding. Every few minutes, work stops. Lamps are shielded. Everyone listens. Sometimes you hear tapping, sometimes scraping. Once you hear a low rumble and become certain the roof is collapsing. It is the miner in front of you digesting lunch. Apologies are made. Eventually, the tapping grows louder. The enemy is close. The soldiers move forward with shields, short swords, axes, and torches. Fighting underground requires smaller weapons because there is no space to swing anything impressive. This is disappointing to anyone hopping for a heroic pose. The final section is dug cautiously. Earth falls away. A dark opening appears. For 1 second, both sides stare through the gap. An enemy miner looks back at you. He appears equally surprised. Then everyone begins shouting. The tunnel erupts into confusion. Men stab through the opening with spears. Picks are swung. Torches fall. Smoke fills the cramped space. You attempt to move backward, but discover that 5 men behind you have made the same decision. Someone throws a basket. Someone else throws dirt. A soldier pushes forward and widens the opening with an axe. The enemy retreats deeper into its tunnel. Your side follows long enough to set fire to their wooden supports, then withdraws before the flames consume the air or bring the roof down. You scramble back through the countermine as smoke rolls behind you. The ground shakes. Timbers crack. A heavy collapse travels through the earth like distant thunder. Back above, part of the street sinks several inches. A wall develops a crack. The city officials call the operation successful. The residents whose houses now lean slightly disagree. By nightfall, the enemy tunnel is blocked. At least that tunnel is blocked. Lookouts continue listening in cellars and quiet rooms across the city. Bowls are placed against floors. Guards inspect foundations. You return home covered in mud from head to toe. Your cousin asks what happened. You explain that you met the enemy underground and threw soil at him. He nods slowly. This is not the heroic war story he expected. You lie down on the floor, exhausted. A faint tapping rises somewhere beneath the street. Nobody moves. The rooster looks at you. Apparently, there is another tunnel. 20, night watch in the rain. It is time for your turn on the wall. Naturally, it is raining. Not dramatic rain. Not the kind that washes the streets clean or fills the wells in one glorious downpour. This is a thin, cold drizzle that slips through wool, runs down your neck, and settles inside your boots with the patience of a tax collector. You report to the northern tower after sunset. The sergeant checks your name, looks at your spear, and asks whether you are awake. You say yes. He looks unconvinced. Your watch lasts until dawn. This feels less like a duty and more like a personal attack on sleep. The battlements are slick beneath your feet. Water runs between the stones and drips from the wooden hoardings above. Braziers burn at intervals along the wall, but they provide warmth only if you stand close enough to set part of yourself on fire. You choose the cold. Beside you stands the baker, wrapped in a cloak that appears to have absorbed half the weather. The tavern man is stationed farther along the wall with his shorter spear and strict instructions not to lean on anything important. Below, the enemy camp glows through the rain. Hundreds of fires flicker across the fields. Tents sag beneath the water. Guards move between earthworks carrying lanterns. Horses shift in their lines. The enemy looks miserable. This is encouraging. They also look well fed. This is less encouraging. Your task is to watch the darkness between the camp and the city. Attackers may approach quietly with ladders, grappling hooks, bundles of brush for filling the ditch, or tools for damaging the gate. They may crawl through mud, hide beneath shields, or wait until the guards are tired. The guards are tired immediately. For the first hour, nothing happens. You stare into the darkness until every bush becomes a crouching soldier. A broken fence post appears to move. A pile of earth develops shoulders. A sheep wanders near the outer ditch and nearly causes a full military response. The baker notices it first. There, he whispers. You grip your spear. The shape moves slowly. The baker raises the alarm halfway, before the sheep turns sideways and reveals itself. The sergeant says several things about the baker's eyesight. The sheep continues its patrol. Another hour passes. Rain taps against helmets and wooden shields. Your fingers stiffen around the spear. You shift your weight from one foot to the other, trying to keep blood moving. The baker begins discussing bread. Not current bread. Past bread. Soft white loaves, warm crusts, rolls brushed with butter, festival cakes filled with honey. You ask him to stop. He continues for several minutes, because suffering enjoys company. Somewhere behind the wall, a baby cries. A dog barks. The church bell marks the hour with a dull note. Farther along the battlements, a guard coughs. Then another answers. For one strange moment, the city and enemy camp are almost quiet. You can hear rain falling into the moat. You can hear your own breathing. You can hear something scraping below. You freeze. The baker hears it too. This time, neither of you speaks. The sound comes again. Wood against stone. Slow and careful. You peer over the battlement, but see nothing beneath the wall. The darkness seems thicker there. You signal the nearest guard. He approaches, listens, then orders a lantern shielded and lowered on a rope. The small light descends toward the base of the wall. For a moment, it reveals only wet stone and mud. Then a shape moves. Someone below pulls away. The guard shouts. The alarm bell rings. Suddenly, the entire wall wakes. Archers rush into position. Crossbow strings tighten. Soldiers carry torches toward the parapet. Men shout down into the darkness. You lean over just far enough to see figures running back across the ditch. Enemy scouts. Perhaps they were measuring the wall. Perhaps preparing ropes. Perhaps simply testing whether the watch was awake. Bolts and arrows vanish into the rain after them. Nobody knows whether they strike anything. Within minutes, the field is empty again. The sergeant orders everyone to remain alert. This is the sort of instruction that sounds much easier after the danger has left. The rest of the night passes without another incident. Now every shadow looks real. Every noise deserves attention. A falling barrel inside the city starts a second alarm. A dog near the gate causes a third. By dawn, your nerves feel scraped clean. The rain finally stops as the eastern sky turns gray. Your replacement climbs the stairs looking warm, dry, and offensively rested. You hand him the spear. He asks whether anything happened. You look toward the dark field, the wet wall, and the sheep still wandering near the ditch. Nothing much, you say. Then you walk home through the waking city, cold to the bone and too tired to sleep. Tonight the wall remained safe, mostly because everyone was terrified enough to stay awake. 21. The sudden attack at dawn. You are halfway home when the horns begin. The sound rolls across the city just before sunrise, low and ugly, followed by drums from beyond the walls. For one hopeful second, you consider pretending you did not hear them. Then every bell in the city starts ringing. You turn around. People spill into the streets, some dressed, some carrying clothes, and some wearing the expression of someone who has just realized retirement will not be happening today. Soldiers race toward the walls. Children run messages between towers. Priests appear in doorways holding crosses and shouting blessings at anyone moving quickly enough to receive one. You climb the northern stairs again. Your replacement is still holding your spear. He looks at you. You look at him. Neither of you feels this is fair. Beyond the battlements, the enemy is advancing. Lines of archers move forward behind wooden shields. Men carry ladders on their shoulders. Others drag bundles of brushwood toward the ditch, hopping to fill the mud and create a path to the walls. The darkness had hidden thousands of them. Now the rising light reveals everything. Drums beat steadily. Officers shout. Banners lift above the moving crowd. The field that seemed empty minutes ago is suddenly packed with men whose morning plans involve entering your city without permission. Enemy archers fire first. Arrows rise in dark clouds and fall toward the battlements. Defenders crouch behind stone and wooden screens. Shafts strike shields, walls, roofs, and occasionally people. One arrow sticks in the baker's shield. He stares at it. Then he explains that the shield belongs to the city, and he will not be paying for repairs. Crossbowmen step forward, fire, and retreat to reload. Archers loose arrows through gaps in the defenses. Stones are carried to the wall. Buckets of water are placed near braziers. Below, attackers reach the ditch. Some throw in branches, straw, timber, and earth. Others raise shields overhead while defenders rain arrows and stones upon them. Men fall, more step forward. The ladders arrive next. They strike the wall with heavy wooden knocks. One lands directly beneath you. A hooked pole is pushed into your hands. The sergeant orders you to shove the ladder away. You lean over the wall. Faces climb toward you. This is the closest you have seen the enemy. They do not look like monsters. They look cold, frightened, muddy, and determined. This somehow makes everything worse. You hook the ladder and push. Nothing happens. The ladder is heavy and packed with men. The baker joins you, then the tavern man. Together you strain against the pole while arrows strike the stone nearby. The ladder begins to tilt. A man near the top reaches for the battlement. For one terrible moment, his hand closes around the edge. Then the ladder falls backward. It carries everyone on it into the men below. Nobody celebrates for long because another ladder rises several yards away. The wall becomes chaos. Defenders throw stones, roof tiles, broken masonry, and pieces of timber. Long spears jab downward. Hooks catch ladders. Sand and water are used against burning material. Orders disappear beneath screaming, bells, drums, splintering wood, and the constant slap of arrows against shields. A soldier beside you is struck in the shoulder. He falls backward. Two people drag him toward the stairs, while another man takes his place before the blood has stopped spreading across the stones. At the gate, attackers swing axes beneath protective coverings. The gatehouse defenders drop stones through openings above them. Smoke rises as burning bundles are pushed against the doors. Inside the city, the bucket brigade forms again. Nobody needs instructions anymore. The assault continues until the sun is fully above the horizon. Then, almost as suddenly as it began, the enemy horns signal retreat. The ladders are abandoned. Survivors run back across the field. Defenders continue firing until they are out of range. Silence returns slowly. The wall is covered with broken arrows, blood, loose stones, and exhausted people. Someone begins cheering. Others join. The enemy failed to enter. You lean against the battlement, too tired to raise your arms. Below, the attackers carry away their wounded and prepare new ladders. The sergeant tells everyone to remain at their posts. This was not the final attack. It was only the enemy checking whether you were ready. You look at the damaged wall, the wounded defenders, and the spear still shaking in your hand. Apparently, the answer was technically yes. 22. The wounded return from the wall. Once the fighting stops, the wounded begin coming down. At first, they arrive one or two at a time. A soldier with an arrow through his arm. A carpenter with a split scalp. A young apprentice carried between two men because one of his legs bends in a direction legs were never asked to consider. Then the numbers grow. The stairways from the walls fill with blood, mud, broken shields, and exhausted defenders trying to support friends who can no longer walk. Doors open across the city. Churches, guild halls, workshops, and large homes become treatment rooms because the actual hospitals, where they exist, were not designed for an entire morning of military enthusiasm. You help carry the soldier who fell beside you. He is conscious. This sounds encouraging until he begins asking whether the arrow is still inside him. It is. You tell him not to look. He looks. This was predictable. The Guildhall floor has been covered with straw. Tables are cleared for surgery. Buckets of water, wine, vinegar, cloth, and tools stand nearby. The room smells of sweat, smoke, blood, wet wool, and the sharp herbs being crushed by assistants who appear to believe fragrance is half the treatment. A surgeon examines the soldier's shoulder. He presses around the wound. The soldier screams. The surgeon nods thoughtfully, as though the scream has confirmed a complicated theory. The arrowhead may be lodged near the bone. It must be removed. There is no proper anesthesia. The soldier is given strong ale and a strip of leather to bite. Two men hold his arms. You are told to keep his legs still. This seems unfair to everyone involved. The surgeon cuts the shaft shorter, widens the wound, and begins working with iron instruments. You stare at the wall. The soldier grips your wrist with enough force to turn your fingers numb. Someone nearby is praying. Someone else is vomiting. The surgeon continues calmly. Medieval surgery is not gentle, but it is not always foolish. Experienced practitioners know how to remove arrows, stitch wounds, set bones, drain abscesses, and stop bleeding. They simply do it without antibiotics, modern pain relief, sterile rooms, or the reassuring knowledge that the tools were not recently used on a different person. The arrowhead finally comes free. It lands in a metal bowl with a small clink. The soldier stops screaming and begins breathing in quick, shallow gasps. The wound is washed with wine, packed and bandaged. The surgeon says infection is now the main danger. This is like surviving a roof collapse and being told the weather may finish the job. Across the hall, broken limbs are pulled straight and tied between wooden splints. Deep cuts are stitched with thread. Burns are covered in grease, honey, herbs, or linen. Bleeding is controlled with pressure, bandages, cautery, and determination. The smell of burned flesh appears. You decide the arrow removal was enough education for one day. Not every wound can be treated. A man with a crushed chest is placed near the wall with a priest beside him. Another has lost too much blood. A defender struck in the stomach lies very still while his wife holds his hand. The healers move past those they cannot save. There are too many others waiting. Triage has existed long before anyone gave it a neat modern name. Help goes where help may still work. Families arrive searching for relatives. Names are shouted across the hall. Children stand near the entrance, looking at every covered shape on the floor. Some find who they came for. Some do not. Outside, carts collect the dead. The bodies are separated from the wounded because space is needed. Cloaks are drawn over faces. Personal belongings are placed beside them when anyone has time to notice. A clerk attempts to record names. Several men are unknown. One was a refugee. Another had been assigned to the wall only days earlier. The clerk leaves blank spaces. By evening, the Guildhall grows quieter. The worst shouting has ended. Now there are groans, whispered prayers, and the soft movement of volunteers replacing cloths and carrying water. The soldier you helped is asleep. His face is pale, but he is alive. The surgeon tells you the next few days will decide everything. You step outside. The street is stained where the wounded were carried through it. Above, defenders are already repairing the battlements and stacking fresh stones. Beyond the walls, the enemy is doing the same. The morning attack is over. But inside the city, it will continue for days in fever, infection, and pain. You survived without a wound. After seeing the treatment, this feels like the greater victory. 23. The rich are also suffering technically. After spending the morning among the wounded, you are sent to deliver a message to the noble quarter. This is how you discover that the siege is not affecting everyone equally. Technically, the wealthy are trapped too. Their gates are closed, their roads are blocked, enemy stones may still fall through their roofs. Disease does not request proof of income before entering a house. But suffering, like everything else in the city, has several price levels. You pass from the crowded market district into a street of larger stone homes with enclosed courtyards, private wells, servants, entrances, and windows covered with actual glass. Somewhere behind you, 18 people are sharing your floor. Here, one family is complaining that 6 guests have been forced to use the west chamber. It is difficult to remain sympathetic. A servant leads you through the home of a wealthy merchant who serves on the city council. The entrance hall is cold but clean. Rushes cover the floor. Tapestries hang against the walls to block drafts. A fire burns in a proper hearth. You briefly consider lying down beside it and refusing to leave. In the next room, the merchant is eating. His meal is not extravagant by peacetime standards. There is dark bread, cheese, onions, salted fish, and watered wine. By siege standards, it is a royal banquet. You stare at the fish. The fish has been dead for some time, yet still appears healthier than several people you know. The merchant reads the message, sighs, and complains that the council has seized 2 of his grain stores. He explains that his household must now economize. A servant removes a half-finished loaf from the table. You wonder where it is going. Your stomach begins taking a professional interest. The wealthy prepared better for sieges because they had more to prepare with. Their cellars held barrels of wine, sacks of grain, smoked meat, dried fruit, oil, candles, and firewood. They owned stronger homes, private courtyards, and storage rooms less accessible to rats, rain, and officials. At least, less accessible until the officials brought guards. As public supplies shrink, private stores become political targets. The council demands contributions. Merchants insist their food is needed for servants, guards, relatives, and essential business partners who happen to enjoy excellent cheese. Nobles claim their horses must be fed for military use. The poor begin suggesting that the horses could serve the city in a different, more delicious form. This creates tension. Still, wealth cannot solve every problem. Servants fall ill, firewood runs low, fine flour disappears, wine is diluted, fresh meat becomes memory. A noble household may begin the siege with roasted poultry and white bread, then slowly descend toward barley loaves and salted beans. This is described as terrible hardship. In your district, people have begun scraping spilled flour from tables. The noble quarter also receives enemy projectiles. Large stone houses resist fire better than timber homes, but roofs collapse just as convincingly. One wealthy family loses an entire upper chamber to a siege stone. Nobody is killed. The owner spends the afternoon complaining about a damaged tapestry. The tapestry depicts a heroic battle. This feels like criticism from the universe. Rumors spread that some wealthy residents are hiding food while others starve. Crowds gather outside certain houses. Guards are posted to prevent looting. One merchant opens his cellar voluntarily to prove he has nothing concealed. The inspection reveals 8 barrels of wine, 3 sacks of oats, smoked pork, dried apples, and enough cheese to start a small religion. He explains that these are ordinary household supplies. The crowd develops a different interpretation of ordinary. By evening, part of the food is confiscated and carried toward communal stores. The merchant watches each barrel leave with the expression of a man attending several funerals at once. You return home carrying a sealed reply and one small piece of bread slipped to you by a kitchen servant. You hide it beneath your cloak. For a moment, you understand the merchants completely. Then you enter your crowded room and divide it among the children. The pieces are tiny. Everyone eats them slowly. Across the city, rich and poor are becoming thinner. The difference is that the poor began first. 24, eating the city one animal at a time. Eventually, the animals begin disappearing. At first, nobody says much. A few chickens vanish from courtyards. Pigeons become less common on rooftops. The stray dogs that once slept near the market are suddenly very difficult to locate. People explain this in several ways. Perhaps the birds have flown away. Perhaps the dogs have escaped through drains. Perhaps every animal in the city has independently decided that the siege lacks long-term potential. Nobody asks too many questions because questions may be answered with stew. The official slaughter begins with livestock that can no longer be fed. Cattle consume grain and hay that humans also require, and the city has reached the stage where every mouth must justify itself before the council. Oxen used for hauling are protected at first. Horses needed by messengers and soldiers are protected longer. Decorative animals receive very little legal support. Butchers are ordered to slaughter selected cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs. The meat is divided, salted when possible, and distributed according to rank, duty, influence, and the mysterious process by which officials always seem to receive the better cuts. Crowds gather outside the butcher stalls. People wait with bowls, tokens, and expressions of restrained violence. You receive a strip of meat so thin that holding it toward the light feels intrusive. At home, it is cut into smaller pieces and added to the communal pot. Everyone receives one piece. The rooster watches from its cage. For the first time, it appears to understand economics. Your cousin suggests the bird is useful because it wakes everyone. His mother says the bells already perform this service. The rooster's position weakens. As the siege continues, horses begin appearing at butcher stalls. These are not the healthiest horses. Strong military animals remain in service, carrying officers, hauling equipment, and looking increasingly nervous whenever they pass a kitchen. Old, injured, or starving animals are slaughtered first. Horse meat is not unfamiliar in desperate conditions, but people still approach it with emotional caution. A horse may have plowed fields, carried messages, pulled carts, or belonged to one family for years. Now it is lunch. Hunger is extremely good at revising relationships. Pigeons disappear next. Children climb roofs to collect eggs and trap birds. Nets are stretched across courtyards. Grain is scattered as bait, although using food to capture smaller food causes philosophical discomfort. Cats become scarce. Some are hidden by owners, some leave the crowded streets, some are stolen. Dogs are guarded indoors by family who still consider them companions. Other households begin describing them as animals that have eaten without contributing for several weeks. Nobody wants to discuss the conclusion. The official food stores now contain almost nothing fresh. Dried peas, spoiled grain, beans, bran, and roots become the base of every meal. Gardens inside the walls are stripped bare. Cabbage stalks are boiled. Turnip leaves are chopped. Onion skins enter pots with confidence. People gather edible weeds from churchyards, courtyards, wall edges, and abandoned lots. Nettles, sorrel, and other plants can provide something green, assuming you can identify them correctly. One family gathers the wrong leaves. The healer becomes involved. Tree bark may be ground and mixed into flour. Leather is scraped, soaked, boiled, and softened when conditions become extreme enough. Old belts, harness pieces, and shield coverings are inspected with a new culinary interest. You place a strip of boiled leather in your mouth. It tastes like a boot. This is because it was part of a boot. You chew for several minutes and make no measurable progress. Across the table, the farmhand claims leather is nourishing if prepared properly. You ask whether this piece was prepared properly. He continues chewing instead of answering. Rats are trapped in storerooms and alleys. For weeks, they have eaten the city's grain. Now the city begins returning the favor. People who once screamed at the sight of a rat now discuss the best way to roast one. The animals are skinned, cleaned, and cooked thoroughly when fuel allows. Someone remarks that they taste like rabbit. Nobody present remembers rabbit well enough to disagree. The children become skilled at noticing anything edible. They collect spilled grain, chase pigeons, gather weeds, and watch every cooking pot with painful concentration. Meals grow quieter. Nobody complains about flavor now. Complaining suggests you have forgotten the central achievement of the meal. It exists. That evening, your household gathers around another thin stew. The pot contains peas, weeds, a little horse fat, and several pieces of meat nobody has identified aloud. The rooster's cage is empty. Your cousin says it escaped. His mother looks into her bowl. Nobody asks where it went. Outside, the bells mark the hour. Inside, spoons scrape wood until every trace of stew is gone. The city still has walls, towers, and banners. But slowly, meal by meal, it is eating everything else. 25. The knock at the gate. The trumpet sounds just after noon. One clear note rises beyond the walls, followed by another. Every head turns toward the main gate. For weeks, the enemy has communicated through stones, arrows, smoke, drums, and occasional attempts to climb into your home. A trumpet is almost polite. This makes it suspicious. Guards rush to the battlements. Archers take position. The gate captain orders everyone away from the entrance, which causes the entire nearby population to move closer. Curiosity remains undefeated by military discipline. You climb onto a broken cart and look between two houses toward the wall. Outside stands a small group of riders beneath a white flag. Their horses are clean. Their cloaks are dry. One man wears polished armor and appears to have eaten recently. The city dislikes him immediately. An envoy rides forward and calls for the gate captain. The captain answers from above. The conversation is shouted across the ditch, which gives diplomacy the calm atmosphere of an argument between neighbors over a hedge. The envoy announces that his commander offers terms. The word travels through the crowd. Terms, not mercy, not peace. Terms. If the city surrenders, the gates will be opened in an orderly fashion. The garrison will lay down its weapons. Certain commanders and officials will become prisoners. A ransom will be paid. The population, the envoy promises, will be spared. People repeat this last part quietly. Spared. It is a powerful word when everyone has spent weeks imagining the alternative. If the offer is refused, the bombardment will continue. The walls will be breached. When the city is taken by force, the commander will no longer guarantee anyone's safety. The envoy says this with impressive calm. He is delivering a threat, but he makes it sound like a weather report. The gate captain tells him the council will consider the offer. The envoy grants 1 day. Then the riders turn and return to camp. By the time they reach their tents, the city has divided itself into 2 armies. One side wants surrender. The food is almost gone. Disease fills the shelters. The walls are damaged. Another assault may succeed. Parents look at thin children and ask what honor will feed them tomorrow. The other side wants resistance. A relief army may still be coming. The enemy may be weaker than it appears. Surrender may bring executions, looting, imprisonment, or promises that disappear the moment the gate opens. Nobody trusts the enemy. Nobody entirely trusts the council either. The debate begins in the streets, before the officials have even reached the council hall. Merchants argue that the city must preserve lives and property. Soldiers accuse them of protecting property first. Refugees demand that the gates remain closed because they have already lost homes outside the walls. Residents whose houses have been destroyed explain that they are beginning to understand the refugees' position less enthusiastically. At the church, priests debate duty and mercy. At the tavern, everyone debates everything. One former soldier insists surrendering would invite slaughter. A carpenter asks whether waiting for a breach would somehow make slaughter less likely. The former soldier tells him he does not understand warfare. The carpenter points out that he has rebuilt the wall 4 times this month and understands enough. Inside the council hall, the city's leaders gather around a table. The commander says the defenses can hold. The master of stores says grain may last another week. The physicians say sickness is spreading. A wealthy merchant says the ransom will ruin the city. Someone asks whether being dead would improve its finances. Outside, the square fills. People wait for news beneath cold rain. Some pray for surrender. Others pray for victory. A few pray that whichever decision is made can be blamed on somebody else later. Then a rider appears on the western wall. He claims lights were seen beyond the hills the previous night. Friendly signals, perhaps. A relief army. The rumor moves through the city like fire. Hope returns instantly, reckless and bright. The council delays its decision. 1 more day, they say. Just 1 more day. That night, you stand near the gate listening to enemy hammers beyond the walls. They are preparing for another assault. Inside, families whisper about the terms. Outside, the envoy's white flag waits in the dark. By tomorrow, the city must decide whether to trust an enemy promise, a distant rumor, or walls that have already begun to crack. For now, the gates remain closed. Hope has bought another night. The price may be everyone inside.